Right as the turkey was being passed and everyone was toasting to family, my brother joked that I'd probably spend next Christmas alone again. I set my fork down, looked around that table, and for the first time in my life, I spoke the truth they never expected to hear. Hi, I'm Emily. I was the quiet one, the helper, the fixer, until I realized silence isn't love, and sacrifice without respect is just slow erasure. What I revealed that night didn't just stop the dinner, it changed everything. Before we dive into the story, let me learn a bit about you. If you're a charming lady, please leave the number 1 in the comments. And if you're a dashing gentleman, leave the number 2. This way, I can send you a special greeting. Now, let's start the story together. I came home soaked from the rain, my scrubs clinging to my legs, and my fingers stiff from the cold. The hallway smelled faintly of someone's reheated leftovers and floor polish. My apartment, small but steady, greeted me with quiet. A single tea light flickered on the counter, the only light left burning. The fake tree in the corner was still unplugged. I hadn't decided yet if I had the energy to pretend it meant anything this year. The moment I toed off my shoes, my phone buzzed. It was Mom. I answered with the same polite breath I always did. Hey. Her voice was sugar-glazed concern. Hi, sweetheart. Just calling to check in. We're all so excited for Christmas this year. I know things have been heavy for you lately, so maybe let's try to keep things light, okay? We don't want any difficult energy at the table. There it was, delivered with a smile but heavy like a stone. After we hung up, I just stood there holding the phone, the dampness from my coat soaking into the carpet. Every Christmas, I told myself maybe this time would feel different, that maybe someone would ask how I was, that maybe they'd leave a seat for me, not out of obligation but intention. Last year, I brought the bread pudding, the one Nana used to make. It was gone in minutes. No one remembered who made it. I peeled off my jacket and left it draped across the back of the chair. The suitcase was still by the door, half-zipped, with a pine green scarf folded on top. I'd already packed the small wrapped gifts, modest things but thoughtful. Tyler's favorite licorice, the book Mom once mentioned in passing, a candle for Dad, cedar and smoke, the kind he used to burn in the garage. There were unopened bills on the counter and a mug of peppermint tea, long gone cold, still sitting by the window. My phone screen was cracked in the top corner. One more thing I never got around to fixing, another buzz. This time, Ava. Hope you're coming. I'd really like to see you. Simple. No expectations. No performance. Just a person being kind. I read the message twice, unsure what part made my chest ache more. The invitation or the fact that it came from someone who didn't owe me anything. I walked over to the fridge, opened the door, and placed the bread pudding inside. Covered it with foil. It would travel well. I clicked the suitcase closed, letting the latch snap shut like a quiet promise to myself. Let's see what silence tastes like this year, I said to no one in particular. Then I turned off the tea light, unplugged the string of lights in the window, and sat on the edge of the bed. I hadn't packed much, but something about this year felt heavier. Not because I was carrying more, but because I finally knew I wasn't meant to carry it alone. When I lay down that night, my body was tired, but not in the way work made me tired. It was something older than that, something that had lived in my bones too long, the kind of tired that made you forget your own shape. As the room dimmed and the hum of the heater filled the silence, I closed my eyes and thought, maybe I wasn't packing for a trip. Maybe I was packing to leave something behind. You made it, Mom said when she opened the door, her smile bright but her tone flat, like she was surprised I showed up but too polite to say it. The house looked exactly like it did every year. Pine-scented candles flickered on the mantel, and the Spotify playlist shuffled through jazzy holiday classics. The table was already set, every napkin folded into a precise triangle. It should have felt warm. It didn't. Before I could take off my coat, Mom handed me a tray. Would you mind slicing the pies and hang those jackets, please? Tyler's bringing guests. I nodded and walked through the hall, past the old photo wall. I paused, just briefly. There used to be a picture of me there, third grade Christmas recital, wearing a red sweater too big for me. It was gone. In its place, a photo of Tyler and Mom at some art fair, both of them beaming. In the kitchen, the same casserole dish from last year sat waiting for the oven. I recognized the foil. I had brought it then, too. No one remembered. Carol's voice floated in. Did you hear Tyler's podcast got mentioned in a local blog? So proud of him. He's really tapped into something fresh. Dad nodded like always, silent, present, unreachable. I kept slicing pies while their voices overlapped in the background. Tyler arrived late, sunglasses still on his head. Carol swept him into a hug. "There's my star," she said, like he'd just flown in from somewhere important instead of from 3 miles away. Ava trailed behind him, her coat still buttoned. She stepped into the kitchen and gave me a small smile. "Hey, did you make the bread pudding?" I nodded. "It's incredible," she said, her voice low, like it was just between us. That shouldn't have hit me the way it did, but it did. Back in the living room, the playlist skipped to a loud pop version of Jingle Bells. I heard Carol telling Aunt May about Tyler's latest creative breakthrough. No one asked about the patients I'd sat with the night before, or the old man who died holding my hand because no one else came. Dinner prep moved on. Mom handed me a stack of plates. "Just try not to overthink things tonight, okay? You have a habit of making things too heavy." I looked at her, but she was already walking away, humming. Tyler passed by me with a smirk. "You're not going to lecture us about hospice again, are you? Nothing says Christmas like terminal care." He laughed, and so did Dad. Even Aunt May gave a soft chuckle, like she didn't want to but couldn't stop herself. The room got smaller then, or maybe I did. I stepped outside. The porch was cold, but it didn't bother me. I leaned against the railing and watched my breath curl into the air. Inside, their laughter rolled on, muffled by glass and distance. I stared through the window. From this angle, the dining room looked like a painting. Carol leaned in close to Tyler, beaming. Dad passed the wine. Ava, though, had shifted. She wasn't laughing. She was looking for something. Then she saw me. Our eyes met. She didn't smile. She didn't wave. But she didn't look away. And for the first time all night, I felt like someone actually saw me. The table was glowing. Candles flickered between crystal glasses and plates stacked with food no one really touched. Carol had arranged everything with precision. Folded napkins, holly sprigs tucked just so, even name cards. Mine said M, not Emily, just M, like a label on a box. We were halfway through the meal when Carol leaned in, wine glass lifted. "I just want to take a moment to say how proud I am of Tyler. His podcast is getting real traction. It takes guts to pursue a dream, and I admire that." Paul nodded. Ava smiled faintly. Aunt May stared at her plate. I kept cutting my turkey into smaller and smaller pieces, not because I was hungry, but because it gave my hands something to do. Tyler chuckled. "Well, someone's got to keep the family interesting." Then, as if on cue, someone, maybe Dad, added, "Emily, what was it you said you do again?" "Something with hospice?" I didn't answer, not right away. Carol spoke instead. "She helps people transition, dear. Important work, but intense." Tyler snorted. "You always overreact," he said, digging into the sweet potatoes. "It's kind of your thing." There it was. The sentence didn't sting the way it used to. It just settled in the air, waiting for me to do what I always did. Smile, nod, swallow it. But this time, I didn't. I set my fork down. The clink was soft but definite. "You know what's actually my thing?" I said calmly. "Paying for the new roof last winter when the insurance didn't cover it. Fixing the hot water heater 2 Thanksgivings ago." The room paused. Even the playlist went silent. "I covered Tyler's rent 3 times when he was between gigs. I scheduled Mom's physical therapy appointments and paid the missed sessions. I filed the taxes. I paid the car note when it defaulted. I called the plumber when the kitchen sink backed up. And I did it all quietly." Carol blinked. "Emily." "I wasn't being intense," I said, my voice still steady. I was being the infrastructure, the thing holding it all together while you celebrated the people making the noise. No one moved. Tyler looked like he didn't know whether to laugh or apologize. I thought if I gave enough, I'd matter, I added. But I don't. I was just useful, and I'm done. I folded my napkin, laid it gently on the plate, and stood. No one stopped me. Not Carol, not Paul, not Tyler. I walked toward the coat rack, pulled my pine green scarf down from the hook, and looped it slowly around my neck. The dessert tray sat untouched on the buffet. Bread pudding, still warm. No one had said a word about it. As I reached the door, I heard Ava behind me. Just one word, soft as breath. Wait. But I didn't. Out in the driveway, the cold wrapped around me. I slid into the car and sat with my hands on the wheel, breathing. For the first time in years, they weren't trembling. And that was all the permission I needed. The apartment greeted me with stillness, not the kind that clings after a long day, but something steadier. This silence had a weight to it, a shape. I didn't flip on the overhead light. I didn't need to. A single tea light flickered on the kitchen counter, casting long shadows against the cupboards. I set my bag down and took off my coat. My scarf slid from my shoulders, landing soft on the chair. I didn't cry. I used to cry in this kitchen, waiting for a callback, a thank you, some nod that I mattered. That night, there were no tears. I opened the fridge and gently slid the bread pudding onto the shelf, still untouched. The foil hadn't shifted. Nobody had asked for seconds. I filled the kettle and waited. The room hummed quietly, the only other sound a faint buzz from the heater. When the water boiled, I poured it over a peppermint tea bag and cradled the mug in both hands. Then I sat down at the table and opened my laptop. My bank account loaded slower than usual, maybe because I hesitated for a second. But once the numbers appeared, I didn't pause again. First, the monthly mortgage payment I'd been sending to my parents since 2020, canceled. Then the emergency Venmo link I'd set up for Tyler, labeled just in case, deleted. Finally, the joint insurance account, one I didn't even drive under anymore, disconnected. The clicks were quiet, almost ceremonial. Each one sealed something. I didn't feel guilt. I didn't feel rage. I felt air, space I hadn't realized I needed. My phone buzzed. Ava, are you okay? I stared at the screen for a moment, then it lit up again. Ava, I saw what you did. I'm sorry it took me so long to see you. I didn't reply right away. Instead, I picked up the phone and dialed Nina. She answered on the second ring. Em, you all right? I think so, I said. I'm just back. There was a pause. Then, soft but clear, Nina said, You didn't leave them. You just stopped bleeding for them. The words settled in me like warm tea. After we hung up, I reached for my old spiral notebook, the one with faded blue lines and a corner that always curled upward. I flipped to a fresh page and began to write. Every repair I paid for, every check I wrote, every holiday I hosted, every favor I was never asked for, just expected to give. 3 pages front and back, not angry, just honest. When I finished, I stared at the ink. It wasn't shaky. It was neat, sharp, like I was finally witnessing my own story in full. I stood, walked to the kitchen sink, and slowly tore the pages out. I held them over the basin and lit the edge with a match. The flames caught quickly, curling the corners into black lace. I watched until they turned to ash, floating down like something that never asked to be carried. The heater clicked off. The apartment exhaled, and so did I. I woke to the sound of rain tapping against the window and a phone vibrating across the nightstand. The light from the screen lit up the room like a flashbulb. 4 missed messages, 2 group tags, 1 unread DM. I sat up slowly, pulling my old sweater tighter around me, the sleeves soft with wear. My tea from last night was still on the desk, cold but untouched. I reached for my phone. The first thing I saw was Ava's post. There was no photo, just white text on a black background. Some families build joy together, others perform it, while deleting the scaffolding beneath them. If you're the one holding up the beams, ask yourself, How long before they let you fall, too? Underneath, the caption read, I saw someone brave enough to walk away this week. She didn't slam the door. She just stopped holding it open. I blinked at the screen, then again, slower. Within minutes, comments poured in. I've been that person. This hit harder than I expected. My sister needs to read this. Thank you for naming it. People I didn't know were sharing their own stories about years of quiet sacrifice, being the dependable one, the forgotten one. They called it being an Emily. That made me laugh, short, surprised. It wasn't mockery, it was recognition. By noon, the post had been shared over 1,000 times. Someone added a screenshot of a podcast segment Ava had once recorded. Another shared a photo of the pudding I had brought to Christmas, sitting untouched at the end of the table. I never posted a comment, never liked or shared. I didn't need to. That afternoon, the mail arrived. A single envelope, plain and hand-addressed. Inside was thick ivory stationery. The handwriting leaned slightly right, deliberate and strong. Dear Dr. Morgan, I don't know if you remember me. I'm Claire Gallagher's daughter. You sat with my mother for 2 nights when we weren't able to get there in time. You read to her from her favorite book. You brought her ice chips when she could barely speak. You didn't just keep her alive. You reminded her she mattered. She told me so herself. Thank you. The letter shook in my hands, not from emotion, but from how firmly it landed inside me. It felt like something permanent, something real. I placed it gently on my desk. Then my email pinged. Subject: Family Matters. It was from Carol, but signed by all 3, Mom, Dad, and Tyler. Emily, we hope you're doing okay. The holidays are emotional for everyone. Ava's post seems to have stirred things up. Would you mind asking her to take it down? It's affecting Tyler's image, and a few of our family friends are confused. This isn't the legacy we want to present. No apology, no mention of what had led to it. Just a gentle nudge to help them tidy the mess I hadn't made. I didn't reply. I moved the email to a folder titled Proof They Never Saw Me. That night, I found a frame at the bottom of my closet. It still had dust on the corners from my last apartment. I cleaned it off, smoothed the letter, and placed it inside. Then I hung it on the wall, just above my desk, where the morning light would reach it first. It was the first thing I'd ever hung just for me. The knock came just after 9, soft but certain. I didn't have to check the peephole. I knew it was them. I'd made tea 15 minutes earlier. Cinnamon apple, the scent rising warm and sweet. The mug sat in my hands as I stayed seated at the table. Outside, the fog wrapped the building in pale gray, as if the city itself had chosen to mute everything unnecessary. They always came when something broke, never when I was whole. Still, I rose and walked to the door, quietly. I looked through the peephole. Carol, Paul, Tyler, standing in their best coats, holding a pie I recognized from the freezer aisle. Carol clutched a wrapped box, small and square. I already knew what was inside. I opened the door an inch, just enough to let the cold slip through. Carol smiled too brightly. Hi, honey. We just wanted to talk. Reset, maybe. It's been a hard season for all of us. Paul added, Family matters, always has. Tyler shifted his weight, holding the pie like it was a shield. Ava says we didn't handle things right. Maybe we could do better. Carol stepped forward slightly and held out the box. You made these for me once, she said, as if it meant something now. I found them in the side drawer. Thought maybe we could start from there. I looked at the wrapping. It was neat. Tucked corners, ribbon reused from some other holiday. I remembered making those coasters from leftover fabric scraps. I'd been 22. She'd never used them. They'd disappeared within weeks. I didn't reach for the box. I'm not angry, I said, my voice level. I'm just done. Carol's smile faltered. We're trying, Emily. No, I said, just that. One word. It landed softly, but it stayed. And then I closed the door. Not in a rush, not with drama, just firmly, fully. The lock slid into place with a gentle click, that felt final. I walked back to the kitchen and poured myself another cup of tea. My hands were steady. Out the window, the fog rolled in thicker, but it didn't feel like something pressing in. It felt like space, like breath, like air I was finally allowed to call mine. I sat at my desk, pulled out a note card, and began to write. Not to them, but to myself. You didn't need to be chosen to be worthy. You were already enough. I folded the card and placed it gently inside the drawer. The sunlight, faint and filtered, crept across the room and caught the edge of the frame on the wall. Mrs. Gallagher's letter, still where I had placed it, glowed in that morning light. Someone had seen me, and this time, that was enough. As sunlight touched the letter on my wall, I felt no urge to explain, to prove, or to fix. I had simply chosen myself, and it was quiet in the best way. Sometimes we confuse being needed with being loved, but real love sees you, not just what you give. And the hardest no often becomes the most honest yes to your own life. If this story stirred something in you, I hope you'll share a part of your journey too. Someone out there may need to know they're not invisible,